I just played the new Batman game for the MetaQuest 3, and let me say, it is wild. First of all, this is the MetaQuest 3. It's one of those VR headsets. I have always wanted to own a VR headset that is good. I have waited until there was one where I didn't need to be plugged into stuff, and one where I didn't need like an incredible computer setup, and one where there was a game that I was actually interested in. Like, that's what got me to buy the PlayStation 4 originally, was the Spider-Man game, where it was like, all right, cool, this is something I need to try. And I love the Batman Arkham games. And this game, Arkham Shadow, is not necessarily the same as those, but it has the same vibe. What I mean is, obviously the gameplay is very different, and also it doesn't take place in the same universe as most of them, although it does kind of take place in the same universe as one of them, which happens to be my favorite one story-wise, so it's a huge win for me. Honestly, I got the regular hardware for this thing. I got an extra headband, like, supporter battery, because you need one, otherwise the battery runs out, and also it helps balance it. And we'll talk about the actual platform and everything else about VR after we get to the game, because the game is the reason that I finally bought one. So Arkham Shadow takes place in the same universe as Arkham Origins. And for people that don't know, it's not worth explaining. It's a very cool game. It's a story about a bunch of hitmen hired by Black Mask trying to kill Batman, but then there's a really cool twist in it that changes things. But I did not know very much about this new Batman game besides it is in that universe, and that the villain is the Rat King or something. Now, I, as a Batman fan, you know, that's one of those words where you hear it and you go, oh, like Ratcatcher, especially people that are familiar with the Suicide Squad are like, that's a character, kind of, you know, uses rats to do crimes or whatever. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. And that character is one of those characters that you may recognize the name of, but obviously it's not high profile enough to definitely be in this universe yet. So it wouldn't mess with the canon of any of the other games. So that makes sense. And the main thing I want to praise the game on is the story. It's such a clever story. It's so similar to other stories about like an early Batman who's still finding his footing, but then also the way it introduces certain characters and concepts is completely new, and it does other things that I don't want to spoil. I will spoil them in this video, but I'm not going to spoil them out here, that I think are really clever, that I have not seen done before. But the basic premise for the game is there are these guys called the Rats, and they are a social movement of people that are tired of corruption. There's too many rats in the city, and the rats are the politicians and the cops and the jails. And these guys are doing all kinds of like domestic terrorism and whatever, assassinating people. And you as Batman are like, I gotta figure out what's going on with these guys. And Batman is brought into this story as part of another trio of him, Commissioner Gordon, and Harvey Dent, much like the Dark Knight, who are trying to rat out the rats separately from the police, figure out like what's going on, and also there's a big event that the rats are going to do something, some sort of terrorism event, so they want to get ahead of that, figure out who is leading the rats, and then stop whatever this is. What this means is you, as Bruce Wayne, go undercover into Blackgate prison, so not Arkham, which I guess that kind of makes sense with the timeline of how Arkham works. I know Blackgate and Arkham might as well be the same place, and this does not have all of the traditional characters you would expect to see at Arkham, but it does have a bunch of them, so it's like, it might as well be Arkham. I'm sure canonically there's a reason why this isn't. I guess the main reason is there's not too many superpowered villains here, but also there are the kind of characters that you would expect to see in Arkham, especially when you get into the later part of the game, but we'll get to that. So you, as to yourself, Bruce Wayne, although to everyone else, an alternate identity you set up called Matches Malone, which is very cute. Matches Malone lights the bat signal on fire, makes a name for himself, goes to this prison. He's going to infiltrate it during the day to figure out who's in charge, and during the night, he's going to turn back into Batman, and Batman's going to do Batman stuff, investigating, fighting villains. And hopefully between Matches Malone and Batman, you'll have enough information to figure out who's the Rat King in time. The biggest change, and I don't know if this was present in Arkham Origins, is that you as Batman were raised by a character named Leslie Tompkins. Leslie Tompkins is a traditional Bat family member, although not one that gets a lot of focus in a lot of the Bat media, but she is a doctor who works for Batman. So Batman will come in, she'll stitch him up. Sometimes in the games, the cartoons, and the movies, this is something that Alfred also does, but in the comics, Leslie Tompkins exists for this purpose. She also has like relationships with the different Robins. Specifically, the one that always comes to mind is the Stephanie Brown Robin in the comics. She adopts Stephanie Brown, pretends that Stephanie has been killed to teach Bruce Wayne a lesson. It's a wild story, but the big idea is just that she is a friendly figure in Batman's life, and she raised young Bruce Wayne. I don't remember when Alfred gets involved, but obviously Alfred still exists in this story too. So Leslie Tompkins works at Blackgate as a doctor. She's going to be the person that facilitates all the Batmaning because she knows you're Batman and Bruce Wayne, so she's going to help you make these moves on the inside. Besides that, in the prison, you don't really have any other allies. They're friends that you make and people that are, friendly to you, but very few like Bat characters you'll be familiar with. For instance, like in some of the Arkham games, just Nightwing will show up and help, but that's not what this is. And this is too early for stuff like that to happen in Batman's story anyway. So you spend most of your time investigating the rats. And if you're me, Batman fan, you hear that the Rat King, if somebody's the Rat King, we got to figure out who he is because he's making all these moves in the prison. You go, it's probably the Rat King, the character Oswald whatever, or Osmond something, who is the Rat King. That character's going to show up and you're going to be like, oh, it's him. And that all makes sense until you realize Rat King is not this just an adaptation of the Ratcatcher, a character from Batman comics. The Ratcatcher also exists in this universe. He is the guy, Otis, who I forgot the name, but I had to look it up. And you meet him, and his job is to recruit rats. So he is part of the Rat King's organization. So then you're like, oh, wait, so now I don't know what's going on. This is an actual mystery story where, as a Batman fan, maybe the same way that, like, if a character came in and his whole thing was he was the alligator man, you would go like, oh, okay, so this is like Killer Croc under some weird false identity. But then you find out that Croc is working for the alligator man, and it's like, oh my God, this is different. And there's a bunch of characters you meet in the prison, a lot of prison guards, plenty of prisoners who I think are new, but then some other prisoners who Batman fans will immediately be familiar with. Also, some of the staff are characters you'll be familiar with. And that's as far as I really want to go with spoilers for this game in terms of who the rats are, who you're working with, specific characters you're going to meet, because I do think it's incredibly clever. I'll talk more spoilers near the end of the video about what I think the game does really well, but let's say one thing that I think is really cool is there is a character who you meet in this who I'm racking my brain, especially in the games, like I don't think we've ever done this, but even in all of Bat media, this is a character you very rarely spend any time with. And I think the way they're woven into the story is so interesting. It's a specific thing to me, like as I was going through this story, I started figuring out what was going on. This thing became clear. And again, I'll talk about it at the end of the video, but I loved it. The game mostly takes place in the prison, which I think is a positive and a negative. Negative because obviously the city is the cool thing, but positive, like you need to be on some sort of track for the VR thing to work. Like navigating in VR is difficult enough. So if you had to like navigate 3D space, flying and gliding and stuff, it just wouldn't work. But all right, so let's talk about the gameplay. I could not play this game. I wanted to. I really, really wanted to. But the VR makes me nauseous. I tried, and it didn't work. So I watched people for hours and hours playing this game on YouTube. That's why I can say, like, I know all the story, and I know the twists and turns, and it's all very clever. I can't fully judge the combat of this game. To me, from what I was seeing, it's very standard VR stuff, like I'm saying. You're walking, but you're also doing punches, you're gliding a little bit, you're using some of the different Bat accessories. If this weren't a VR game, it would be the most basic slimmed down Arkham game ever made. But for being a VR game, it's pretty good. I also think they get the visual style of it right. There's not a ton of boss fights, which I'm not shocked by, because what could they be in a game like this? Like, especially the game set in the Arkham universe where you've got all those incredible boss fights. Like, as much as I think it would be really cool if this game had a Mr. Freeze in Arkham City level, like, creative boss fight, and I think they could maybe get away with that one specifically, but like they just can't do it. You do sneak around a lot in vents, and that's something that like in the regular games doesn't really matter, but it does feel like something you're doing. I didn't make it that far that I was able to like get into a vent. And one thing that I think was really impressive about this game, and something that I was worried about with VR games in general, is like, it's not just a bunch of things you have to do in order. There are like side quests and stuff in the shop that you go to get supplies. Like, it is a pretty simple game compared to the other Arkham games, but compared to other VR games, like, there are trophies and things that you can collect. Like, it is not just the most basic VR experience in Batman world. And I think the effects for what it is and where this technology is are fine. Obviously, it would be cooler if they all looked completely photorealistic, but like that doesn't even exist on regular consoles, so how would it exist in the VR universe? But gameplay wise, I cannot speak to it too much because I just cannot use this goddamn thing, especially when it comes to games like this. There's different games that are a little simpler, like the mini golf game, that I can handle. But games like this where you have to turn around, you have to look at things, like, it is just too much for my brain. So that is part 1 of the reviewing the game. Overall, I think the game is great. It is a humongous achievement. It seems like it's one of the best VR games ever made, and it is one of the most clever Batman Arkham stories, I think, told. I think the way the mystery unfolds, the characters you meet, what it is saying about Batman, like the themes, it really does have something to say. Like, I think this could be a movie. It feels like something thematically that would fit right into the Reeves-averse, and that's so cool. All right, so real quick, let's talk about this headset. So as I said, Arkham game, it's very involved. Controlling it is tough, and I do think like they're doing their best, but I still cannot play like a game like this for more than like 20 minutes at a time. Other games, like a mini golf game, for example, I can play for more than 20 minutes at a time. I will say, besides that, those two specifically, there are some games in this, but it is not the kind of environment that I was hoping for. In terms of actual full games, there are things you can do in it that are kind of fun. You can like shoot balls and stuff in like a little shooting range. But as someone who knows how much money Meta has put into this and knows how big of an, like, you know, it does seem like Mark Zuckerberg likes this technology. And like, I think in some ways he probably sees it as valuable for the future of the company, but I think in other ways, kind of the same way that Bezos loved Expanse. And then I think this is the story I've heard, like, bought Expanse so that he could use Amazon Prime to make more Expanse, which is like the only cool thing the billionaires that are in charge of the country do. But like, I think he likes this technology because Meta bought Oculus when they were just Oculus decades ago, I guess, at least a decade ago. And I can't imagine you would take that sort of bet and be this committed to it if it wasn't something you specifically enjoyed. Especially because I've seen videos of him playing with his new AR glasses, which he also, you know, does the same things as this with, where you like web browse in real time and also like play ping pong, which is something he loves to do because it's a game that's relatively simple to render in like this kind of environment. And he seems to be having a lot of fun. But considering that, I don't think there are nearly enough things to do on this headset for it to be worth $500, which is how much I paid for it. Because to be fair, I got the $500 version instead of the $300 version. I cannot explain why. I know there are different lenses or something, but based on all of the reviews, people said the $500 one is better. One thing that is cool that I was not familiar with is it has these 3 cameras in the front. So, or at least what seem to be 3 cameras. I don't know, maybe it's 2 cameras and some other sensor, but it has sensors in the front that it uses to create for you the environment you are in. Sorry, my cat Mortimer is attacking me. So it's cool though, because you can like be in a room, be all in VR mode, and then just press a button and then you can see your room pretty well. Like, it's obviously a little weird because you're seeing it on a screen in front of you, but like, I think it captures the space well enough that like you can, you know, hear a phone notification and then pause the VR, find your phone. Or like, for instance, if you're playing a game and you want to get some water, just tap the thing, you see the water, you drink it, and put it back. Like, that's a very seamless environmental interaction. There's a lot of other games that I would say also feel like very, very cool demos of games where they scan the environment you're in and then like aliens invade through that and it's an AR experience. I think those are cool. Okay, Mortimer, you're done. Too much. This is why I don't need the AR partially. It's because I already have this monster guy in my room who attacks me sometimes. So those are fun. But again, those feel like demos. It does not feel like playing a game like Marvel Rivals or something like that. I got into some of the meta spaces where it's like a city, and I don't really care for those either. Like, that's the thing. Besides this Batman game, which they clearly put a lot of money and effort into, and a couple of other games, like I think the Half-Life game I think is on this, which I didn't play because I'm not a huge horror guy. I don't see a lot of other games that make this worth using. So then it's like, well, what about other stuff? Browsing the web? Weird. I don't like it. Part of it I can kind of see it's fun. Watching videos on a big screen in front of you is cool, but like, I'm not the kind of person who can't enjoy that as much on a television or on, browsing on a phone. Just like the clicking and the using your fingers, I don't enjoy it. So the Verge found a game, incredible, likely one of the best VR games ever made. And like, I played like Beat Saber, in the classic games, but this feels like something different. This feels like a leap forward in terms of a narrative game. And as far as the headset, like, I had a little fun with the fishing game and the mini golf game. Besides that, like, I am returning this thing. I do not like it. Part of it is just my body doesn't like it. Like, it makes me dizzy and somewhat nauseous depending on what I'm doing with it. But if I have like a full range of motion, I'm supposed to be swinging and jumping and stuff, that is gonna that does not work for me. Part of it is just there are not enough games. And part of it is also, I do not like Facebook. Like, I know I was talking about Zuckerberg before. I do not like that he bought this company. I was very excited back in the day to buy an Oculus. And I was like, oh my God, this is cool. It's the future, you know, before Ready Player One and all the other stuff made it look stupid. I mean, it always looked stupid, but like, I could see the applications of this. And then Mark Zuckerberg bought it, and it was part of Facebook and Meta or whatever. And I said, well, I don't want it now. I would never like to buy anything from Meta. I don't use Facebook. I don't use Instagram. I'm one of those people who grew up during Facebook, right? Like, I did not have Facebook all of high school. I think maybe when I was like a sophomore or junior in high school, Facebook became available to non-college students. So I was like right on the forefront. And I remember when it was a useful technology that people liked. I guess the things I don't like about Facebook are not that different from the things I wouldn't like about most social networks. Although I do think there's a case to be made that Facebook and Zuckerberg are worse than all the rest of them. But like, I was around for MySpace. I was around for the website that encouraged you to publicly make a list of your 8 best friends that everyone could see, and then you would go to your friend's one and hope that you were on their top 8. Like, that was a feature. And that was a public feature that had no utility besides just making everybody feel weird. Some people felt special, some people felt like, oh, I do not think I should be on your top 8. But like, I don't think Facebook has ever done something like that. But in terms of privacy, in terms of the way that they moderate, they're one of those companies, and John Oliver did a great video about this, that loves to move fast and break things, and sometimes that's cool, but other times, like, that means they don't do content moderation at all because they don't have people to moderate content in that language. So people are able to go wild and like organize big coups of governments on Facebook. Again, great John Oliver video, I will link it. But like, for me, as someone who believes that a platform like Facebook does have a responsibility to do some moderation, right? But I think this philosophy of move fast and break things lets Zuckerberg be incredibly irresponsible with this humongous technology that everyone uses. And then now they're trying to put AI Facebook profiles into Facebook. So you can interact with someone and make a friend that's an AI and then talk to them, I guess, and then like their photos and they like your photos, and it's not anything. Like, it is the most sad, horrible interaction. Like, at least in the movie Her, the AI was kind of like an assistant that also became like a sentient thing the guy fell in love with. But this is just a person, a fake person for you to talk to. And again, Facebook is not alone in, as a social media company, doing weird things when it comes to like society and how we interact. And I do think the big nail in the coffin for me was probably Mark Zuckerberg with his stupid chain on the Joe Rogan show, acting like a real dweeb, talking about how, oh, we don't need to do content moderation. We're just going to do community posts. And like, there's too much of a bias in social media to the left. And I just cannot do it. And if you're saying, hey, Nando, why are you making this video political? Listen, we just talked about a Batman game where an angry mob of people wants to overthrow the police and the government because of abuse at the prison system. Like, this is the most political Batman game that's ever been made, and you heard all that, right? So this is part of that. This is the thing. Like, the guy that made the platform that you play that game on also has really strange politics. But I do think, as far as people that are running the communication infrastructure in America, like, Zuckerberg is right up there in terms of ones that I do not trust and never want to interact with. So I bought this, and then a couple days later, he comes out and says, we're not going to do fact checking anymore. And then they say, oh, we're going to put all these weird AI profiles in our website. And then I was like, oh, right, that's why I never bought one of these, because of Zuckerberg and all his dumb Facebook stuff. And I never wanted to buy anything that was part of that, especially, I mean, forget about Facebook and privacy and the fact that this thing is like cameras in your house constantly watching, you know, the environment. And sure, maybe it's just for games, but also that is not a company I trust with privacy at all. And I'm not like a technology YouTuber or anything, so I will link to articles in this video's description that describe what I'm talking about in terms of Facebook weird privacy stuff. And I'm sure, like, legally they will say they're not using the camera to spy on you. Maybe that's true now, but this is not a company that has earned my trust. And even if it's not just being used to spy on you, like, the product is weird. The games are weird. It's not good. The metaverse is stupid. I recommend this Batman game because it's really good, but I could not in a million years recommend buying one of these things. It could, absolutely not. So that is my review of the Meta Oculus Rift 3. Last thing I want to talk about is the actual story of the Batman game, the things that I could not spoil. But I will spoil them now. So if you want to go in blind, don't watch this. If you think you'll never play this game, you can watch this, I guess. You can also watch playthroughs of people playing the game because there's a lot of really cool stuff there. And like I said, I'm not really talking about the gameplay as much as just the story, what I like about the story. that you can all mostly get through videos. Like, there is something to the immersion of playing this game, I'm sure, and how you feel about certain characters, but I do think most of that gets conveyed through just watching someone play it as well, because of the writing and the way that the characters voice act. So first of all, the mystery of who is the Rat King. It's one of those mysteries that, like, you have a couple of suspects, and then once they eliminate like one or two of them, you're like, oh, okay, then it must be this guy. And that part of it maybe could make it feel a little bit unsatisfying, but I think the thing that was interesting for me is more of the how. Once you figure out the who, because for this to work, the who has to be someone who by the end of Act 1 of the game, like, we have at least met or heard of. So it's a very small group of characters. But I do think what they do with the character who it ends up being is clever. That's not the thing that I think is the most clever thing about this game. I do like what it says about prison. Specifically, the prison warden is incredibly abusive. That's always been something that's been somewhat true of the Arkhamverse, but I think what's usually how that feels like it's done in the comics and the movies and stuff, especially Batman Begins, you have like, oh, the Arkham system is really, really terrible, and it's being run by a supervillain, and it's like, right, yeah, Scarecrow is a bad guy. Or like in the comics, Hugo Strange is like one of the bad guys of comics who like runs the prison and also does experiments and turns guys into monsters. What I like about this is the person running the prison is just a guy running the prison, and he is just a corrupt, weird paramilitary guy who has all these systems in place to abuse the prisons. But listen, I'm not gonna pretend that it's easy to run a prison that like Mr. Freeze is at or the Joker is at, but at the same time, it's clear this guy's not doing it right, and especially from the perspective of the game. So I think that is great. I think that is an angle for a future Batman thing to take, and especially the Reeveverse, and it seemed like they were going to do this with Arkham, like some sort of Arkham show, is just explore what is going on there. Why is that place so broken? And what could Batman be doing better, or what forces want it to stay broken at least? What is, you know, who is benefiting from this? And I like that the Rats and the Rat King, so like I'll just say it, the Rat King is Harvey Dent, and he's like kind of your brother. You were both foster kids growing up, or like friends. I can't remember exactly how it's set up, because he does have a dad, but his dad is bad, his dad is abusive, and his dad has dissociative identity disorder, which I'm sure this part of the story is like bad in terms of how it represents whatever dissociative identity disorder they would say Two-Face and, you know, Harvey has in this, and Harvey's dad. But the idea that it is like his dad's like, we got the sickness in us, Harv, and then Harvey by the end of the game is like, I'm sick just like my dad, I'm evil. That's like a horrible stereotype, but like that's Two-Face. I wasn't expecting very much there, and I don't think this game is about Two-Face as much as it just seems to be using him to tell this story and like have a character who is close to us who doesn't even know that he's secretly the Rat King. The thing that I was so impressed with, and the thing that I think you get a little bit of early, and then as the game goes on, you get a lot more of it, is like, we know the Batman story. Everybody knows parents murdered in an alley, and this is not different, except for in this story, Leslie Tompkins finds him before Alfred does, and she's the person who's like, oh, hold on, little kid, everything's gonna be okay. And there's a bit where you do, because the Scarecrow is here and Harley Quinn is here, and you do like an evil Scarecrow level where you like hallucinate and you're walking down Crime Alley, and it's like, oh my god, it's real. But that is all to remind you, I think, as a plot mechanism, like that this is the driving force in Batman's life, which is something that no one who's ever read or seen a Batman thing before needs to get reminded of. But I do think you got to put it in something like this, because the criminal who kind of takes you under his wing, and as the game goes and you figure out who he is, you're like, oh, this better not be the Rat King. That would be bad for this story. I'd love it if he wasn't the Rat King and he was just a guy who he was kind of seeming to be. And he does seem to be. Like, by the end of the game, there's not a secret motive or, you know, evil persona that this character has. You meet as Matches Malone and befriend the guy who runs the store in the prison, who is a prisoner. Like, I don't know how to describe what this is. It's Joe Chill, the person that shot your parents. And that's not super clear to you, because for most of the game, I believe he is Joe. But this is like the first Batman thing I could think of where Batman, not knowing it, spends a lot of time with the guy that killed his parents and has to wrestle with the fact that he is not a bad guy. Like, he obviously did something terrible and he feels very bad about that. And his character's been in jail, it seems like, since the actual crime took place. So he has spent a lot of time thinking about it, thinking about whether he is rehabilitated, thinking about if a person like him can even be rehabilitated, and trying to be a nice, good person. And by the end of the game, you as Batman have to save Joe Chill. And you have to go like, listen, this guy doesn't deserve to die. This guy who kind of represents the criminal element that has always made me want to be a crime fighter. He might not be the worst guy in the world. He actually might be nice and reformed, and he may have made a mistake a very long time ago, and he may genuinely feel really bad about that. And it's like, well, then what does throwing that guy into a prison like Blackgate that is run by these abusive wardens, and what does this system do for someone like that? Because originally, especially the way that Batman kind of takes this story in, the prison's weird, but you always go like, but there are guys that like need to be in a prison like this. But because Joe Chill is so important in Batman's story, the idea that he is in this prison, and just by the virtue of like him going to prison therapy and working and trying to be a better person, like exposed that like you can change. This supermax evil prison might not be the solution for everyone, even the person who seems like it really should be for. I think that is fascinating, and that's the kind of thing that I don't think a movie could do, and I don't think this does it either in terms of fully surprising you. For me, when I meet a guy named Joe, for a second I'm like, okay, well, this could be anybody. This could just be a guy named Joe. And then as you start spending more time with him and he starts saying, oh, the things I did in my past, you're like, oh my god, this is Joe Chill. Hell yeah, I'm gonna spend time with him like I've never seen that done before. It's so smart. And the fact that he is tied into the end of the plot and Batman has to spare his life and like choose not to do something like that and turn this corner emotionally, especially because over the course of the game, through these therapy sessions with Harley and then eventually Scarecrow, although not as those characters, but as like Dr. Crane and Dr. Quinzel, and also talking with Leslie, you get the sense that this Batman is kind of on the wrong path. Like he is getting into his shadow self, letting that control him, which that is a word that gets said way too much. Between that and Silo, there was a week where I was just hearing the word shadow every other sentence. But this shadow of Batman, that is this darkness that is controlling Batman, is something that at this point in the story he needs to get rid of. And letting Joe Chill go and learning that about Joe Chill is a great way to do that in a Batman story, and it's so damn cool. Like, I loved it, and like maybe I would have even loved it more if I was fully immersed in the universe and not just watching it on TV. But either way, like, that is an idea that a Batman thing should totally do in the future, because I loved it. And I'm sure there's people that have read Batman comics that are like, no, that's happened. I have not read every Batman comic, but at least in terms of watching all the movies and most of the shows and playing most of the games, that is not something I've ever seen done before. So to wrap this all up, again, overall, the Batman Arkham Shadow game, and specifically the story of it, great. Some of my favorite Batman stuff I've experienced in like a while. Probably my favorite Batman thing, well, I mean, even Penguin was also great. We're in a like golden age of Batman stuff. Between the cartoon that just came out, the Reeve stuff, that one image of him in Creature Commandos, just great stuff. The Meta Quest Horizon, whatever the heck it's called, hate it. Do not like it. It is a very cool piece of technology that does not have nearly enough functionality to be worth it for me to use, and also it is run by a company that I just fully do not like and do not want to give any money or attention to. But if you do want to give attention to something, I could recommend this video's sponsor, Nebula. If you've never heard of it before, Nebula is a subscription streaming service that me and a bunch of other YouTubers, a lot of people you're probably already watching, created because we wanted to have more control over our videos. We didn't want to have to cater to the algorithm, and we wanted to offer a better experience to you guys so you can watch all of my videos. They're all early. Some of them are like a full month early, some of them are like a day early, but every video goes up first on Nebula, and that is Nando V Movies, and that is the Nando Cut, both of my channels, and they're completely ad-free, so there's no ads in the middle, and there's no sponsor read at the end. And in 2025, we have so much cool stuff that we are working on. One thing that I am very excited about is a show called Abolish Everything. This is a live show that happens in the city where people come in and bring something that they hate, and they give a short presentation on why it should be abolished. Then a panel of experts goes in and questions them. And I'm excited for Abolish Everything because, like Nebula, we have a reputation for being very smart. We have a lot of very, very educated people who do research and make documentaries, but we also have a lot of really funny people, and I am excited to see that side of Nebula growing. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal at $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for $3 a month. It is an incredible deal. Go check it out. You're going to love it. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching this. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.